The bullet tore through Maxwell Young's hat just as he reached for the saloon door. And in that split second between life and death, he saw her face in the dusty window, eyes wide with terror that would haunt him for months to come. It was July 1878 in Hawthorne, Nevada, a silver mining town that had sprung up practically overnight when prospectors discovered veins of ore running through the hills like rivers of fortune. Maxwell had been riding through, same as he always did, never staying anywhere longer than a week or two. At 26 years old, he had been drifting for 8 years, ever since his family's ranch in Texas burned to the ground with his parents inside. The open trail was all he knew now, the loneliness his only constant companion. The gunshot came from Johnny Bass, a hired gun working for one of the mine owners who did not take kindly to drifters passing through. Maxwell dropped low, his own revolver clearing leather before Bass could fire again. The second shot went wild, shattering the saloon window where that face had been. Maxwell's heart lurched, but he could not think about that now. Bass was moving, ducking behind a water trough. "I do not want trouble," Maxwell called out, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his veins. "I am just passing through." "Nobody just passes through Hawthorne," Bass shouted back. "Mr. Thornton wants to know everyone's business in this town." Maxwell had heard of Benjamin Thornton, the mining magnate who practically owned Hawthorne. Men like Thornton thought their money made them kings, and maybe in these small towns it did. But Maxwell had no interest in bowing to anyone. "Then tell Mr. Thornton I will be gone by morning," Maxwell said, already calculating his escape route. The alley between the saloon and the general store would give him cover to reach his horse. But before Bass could respond, a voice rang out from the saloon doorway, clear and strong despite its feminine softness. "Stop this right now. There has been enough bloodshed in this town." Maxwell risked a glance and saw her fully for the first time. She stood in the doorway, glass fragments glittering in her dark hair, her green eyes blazing with righteous anger. She wore a simple blue calico dress, but she carried herself with the bearing of someone who would not be ignored. She looked to be around 23 or 24, with delicate features that belied the steel in her spine. "Miss Norton, get back inside," Bass called, but his voice had lost its edge. "This is not your concern." "Rebecca Norton runs the boarding house, Bass, which makes everything in this town my concern." She stepped fully into the street, positioning herself between the two men. "Maxwell Young has a room reserved at my establishment. He is a paying customer, not an outlaw. Now put your gun away before Sheriff Morgan hears about this." Maxwell felt something shift in his chest at hearing his name from her lips, though he had no idea how she knew it. The way she said it, with such certainty and authority, made him want to be worthy of that confidence. Bass hesitated, then slowly holstered his weapon. "Mr. Thornton will hear about this." "I am sure he will," Rebecca said coolly, "and I will be happy to tell him how his hired gun shoots at unarmed travelers in broad daylight." After Bass stalked away, Rebecca turned to Maxwell. Her expression softened slightly, though wariness remained in her eyes. "You can put your gun away too, Mr. Young. You are safe now." Maxwell holstered his revolver, suddenly aware of how tired he was. Tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of this endless wandering that had defined his adult life. "How did you know my name?" "The telegraph operator told me you were coming. You sent a message 3 days ago asking about accommodations." She brushed glass from her sleeve with practiced efficiency. "I am sorry about Bass. Mr. Thornton has everyone on edge. There have been disputes over mining claims, and he sees threats everywhere." "I appreciate your intervention, Miss Norton," Maxwell said, picking up his hat and examining the bullet hole with a rueful expression. "Though I hope I have not brought trouble to your door." "Trouble finds its own way around here," Rebecca said with a slight smile. "Come on, let me show you to the boarding house before anything else happens." As he followed her down the dusty main street, Maxwell found himself studying her with an interest that went beyond mere gratitude. She walked with purpose, greeting townspeople by name, stopping to check on an elderly woman carrying too many parcels. There was a warmth to her, a genuine care for the people around her that Maxwell had rarely encountered in his travels. The boarding house stood at the edge of town, a two-story structure that had been painted white once, but now wore the perpetual dust of Nevada like a second skin. Inside, however, it was immaculate. Lace curtains hung in the windows, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. "I keep 6 rooms for travelers," Rebecca explained as she led him up a narrow staircase. "Meals are included, breakfast at 7 and supper at 6. There is a wash-house out back and fresh water in the pitcher." She opened a door to reveal a modest room with a bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the street. After weeks of sleeping under stars or in filthy hotel rooms, it looked like paradise. "This is perfect," Maxwell said, setting his saddlebags on the floor. "What do I owe you?" $2 for the week, Rebecca said. "Payment up front." As Maxwell counted out the coins, he found himself reluctant to see her leave. "Miss Norton, I want to thank you again for what you did. You took a risk out there." Rebecca's expression became distant for a moment, as if remembering something painful. "My father was shot in the street 3 years ago. A disagreement over a mining claim that could have been settled with words instead of bullets. I swore then that I would not stand by and watch it happen again if I could prevent it." "I am sorry for your loss," Maxwell said quietly. "Thank you." She straightened her shoulders, pushing away the grief. "Supper is in 2 hours. Try to stay out of trouble until then." After she left, Maxwell lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. He should leave, ride out tonight and avoid whatever storm was brewing in Hawthorne. That was what he always did, never staying long enough to put down roots, never getting close enough to anyone to risk the pain of loss again. But something kept him there, and he knew it was more than just the comfortable bed or the promise of a hot meal. It was the way Rebecca Norton had stood in that street, fearless and determined. It was the way she said his name like it meant something. That evening, Maxwell washed up and made his way downstairs to the dining room. 5 other boarders sat around a long table, and Rebecca moved between them with a coffee pot, filling cups and responding to their friendly banter. She had changed into a dark green dress that brought out her eyes, and her hair was pinned up in a more formal style. She introduced Maxwell to the others. Samuel Hart, a prospector who had struck a small claim, Margaret Chen, a widow who ran a laundry service, Thomas Fletcher, a carpenter from California, William Nash, the town doctor, and Peter Larson, who owned the general store. They were all friendly enough, welcoming Maxwell with the easy camaraderie of people who shared meals regularly. The food was excellent: roasted chicken with potatoes and carrots, followed by apple pie that melted on Maxwell's tongue. As he ate, he found himself watching Rebecca, noticing the small kindnesses she showed each boarder, remembering their preferences and asking about their days. "So, Mr. Young," Dr. Nash said, his gray eyes curious behind wire-rimmed spectacles, "what brings you to Hawthorne?" "Are you a prospector like half the men in Nevada?" "Just passing through," Maxwell said, the answer automatic after years of practice. "I travel, pick up work where I can find it." "Must be lonely," Margaret Chen observed. She was in her 40s, with silver threading through her black hair and a directness Maxwell appreciated. "No family." "No, madam," Maxwell said. Not anymore. Rebecca caught his eye from across the table, and he saw understanding there. She knew what it was like to lose people too. After supper, Maxwell offered to help clear the dishes, ignoring Rebecca's protests that boarders were not expected to work. In the kitchen, they fell into an easy rhythm, Rebecca washing while Maxwell dried and stacked. "You do not have to do this," Rebecca said, though she sounded more amused than annoyed. "My mother raised me to be useful," Maxwell replied. "Besides, it is the least I can do after you saved my life this afternoon." "I think you would have handled base on your own," Rebecca said. "You moved like a man familiar with trouble." "Trouble and I are old acquaintances," Maxwell admitted, "but I try to avoid it when possible. Yet here you are in Hawthorne, which is practically trouble's permanent address these days." Rebecca handed him a clean plate. "Why did you really come here?" Maxwell considered lying, then decided she deserved honesty. "I heard the silver mines were hiring guards. Thought I might stay a few weeks, earn some money. Working for Thornton. I had not decided yet. Now, after meeting his man base, I think I will find work elsewhere." Rebecca smiled at that. "Good. Thornton is poison, slowly killing this town. He buys up every claim he can, pressures people to sell their properties, runs roughshod over anyone who stands up to him." "And you stand up to him," Maxwell said, not making it a question. "Someone has to." Rebecca's hand stilled in the soapy water. "My father owned a silver claim, a good one. Thornton wanted it, offered a fraction of what it was worth. When my father refused, suddenly there were problems. Equipment stolen, ore shipments waylaid. Then one day, Thornton's men claimed my father had jumped one of their claims. The argument ended with my father dead in the street and Thornton owning his mine." "Did the sheriff do anything?" Rebecca laughed bitterly. "Sheriff Morgan is on Thornton's payroll, just like half this town. But the other half, the people who remember what Hawthorne was before Thornton arrived, we do what we can to resist." Maxwell dried the last dish, his mind working. He should still leave, avoid getting tangled in local politics and power struggles. But looking at Rebecca, seeing the pain and determination in her face, he found his resolve weakening. "This boarding house," Maxwell said. "Thornton must want it too. Prime location, well maintained." "He has made offers," Rebecca confirmed. "I keep refusing. This was my father's dream, the life he built for us after my mother died. I will not let Thornton take it. Even if it is dangerous." Rebecca turned to face him fully, water dripping from her hands. "Especially because it is dangerous. If we all give in to him out of fear, what kind of town will Hawthorne become? What kind of people will we be?" In that moment, Maxwell understood why she had stepped between him and Base's gun. Rebecca Norton was not just brave, she was principled in a way that was rare and precious. And utterly terrifying to a man who had spent 8 years avoiding exactly this kind of entanglement. Over the next few days, Maxwell found reasons to stay in Hawthorne. He helped Peter Larson repair shelving in the general store, assisted Dr. Nash in building a new examination table, and even spent an afternoon helping Samuel Hart shore up a tunnel at his mine. The work was honest and the pay fair, but Maxwell knew he was lying to himself about his real reason for staying. He was drawn to Rebecca Norton like a moth to flame, and just as likely to get burned. They fell into a pattern. Each morning, Maxwell would come down to breakfast and find Rebecca already working, cooking eggs and bacon for her boarders. Each evening, he would help her clean up after supper, their conversations ranging from the mundane to the profound. She told him about growing up in Hawthorne, about her father teaching her to read using mining reports and her mother's old Bible. He found himself sharing stories of his childhood in Texas, memories he had locked away after the fire. "You never wanted to go back," Rebecca asked one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. Rebuild the ranch. Maxwell shook his head. There was nothing to go back to. The land was sold for debts, and without my parents it was just dirt and bad memories. So you have been wandering ever since, Rebecca said softly. Looking for something. Maybe, Maxwell admitted, or running from something. I have never been sure which. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, then said, My father used to say that roots are what give a tree strength. Without them, even the mightiest oak will fall. Are you calling me an oak tree, Miss Norton? Maxwell asked with a slight smile. I am saying that everyone needs somewhere to belong, Rebecca replied. Even wandering cowboys. Before Maxwell could respond, the sound of breaking glass shattered the peaceful evening. Both of them jumped to their feet as shouting erupted from the main street. Maxwell's hand went to his revolver as they ran toward the commotion. A crowd had gathered outside Peter Larson's general store. Smoke poured from the broken windows, and flames were already visible inside. Peter stood in the street, his face stricken as he watched his livelihood burn. What happened? Rebecca demanded, pushing through the crowd. I closed up an hour ago, Peter said, his voice hollow with shock. I was having supper at the hotel. Someone must have broken in and started the fire. Maxwell was already organizing the townspeople into a bucket brigade, directing them to the nearest well. The fire was spreading fast, and if they did not contain it soon, the whole block would go up. He worked alongside the others, passing buckets and directing water at the flames, his lungs burning from smoke inhalation. Rebecca worked just as hard, her dress soaked and filthy, her face streaked with soot. Together with the townspeople, they managed to contain the fire, though the general store was a total loss. As dawn broke over Hawthorne, Peter Larson sat on the steps of what had been his store, staring at the smoking ruins. Rebecca sat beside him, offering what comfort she could. It was Thornton, Peter said quietly. I know it was. He has been trying to buy this property for months, wants to put in a fancy hotel. Do you have proof? Maxwell asked, though he already knew the answer. Peter shook his head. Nobody saw anything. And even if they did, Sheriff Morgan would not do anything about it. Maxwell looked around at the exhausted townspeople, saw their anger and fear. This was the reality of Hawthorne, a town held hostage by one man's greed. He should mount his horse and ride away before he got pulled in deeper. But when he looked at Rebecca, saw the determination still burning in her eyes despite her exhaustion, he knew he was not going anywhere. We need to fight back, Rebecca said, her voice carrying across the crowd. Not with violence, but with unity. Thornton thinks he can pick us off one by one, intimidate us into submission. But if we stand together, protect each other, he cannot win. Easy to say when you are not the one who lost everything, someone muttered from the crowd. My father lost everything to Thornton, including his life, Rebecca shot back. I know exactly what is at stake, but giving in to fear only makes Thornton stronger. Maxwell watched her rally the townspeople, saw the way they responded to her passion and conviction. She was a natural leader, something this town desperately needed. And in that moment, Maxwell made a decision that would change his life forever. Miss Norton is right, he said, stepping forward. Thornton is counting on you being divided and scared. But I have seen what happens when good people stand up to bullies. Sometimes the bully backs down. And who are you? An older man challenged. You have been here less than a week. This is not your fight. Maybe not, Maxwell agreed. But I have spent 8 years running from fights, and I am tired of running. If you will have me, I would like to help. Rebecca's eyes met his across the crowd, and the gratitude and hope he saw there made his chest tighten. Whatever happened next, he knew he had made the right choice. Over the following weeks, Maxwell became an integral part of Hawthorne's resistance against Thornton's tyranny. He organized groups to patrol the streets at night, preventing further acts of sabotage. He helped coordinate the rebuilding of Peter's store, with materials donated by sympathetic townspeople. He even convinced Samuel Hart to share some of his silver strike profits to help those who had lost income due to Thornton's interference. Through it all, his connection with Rebecca deepened. They spent hours together planning strategies, coordinating efforts, sharing quiet conversations on the boarding house porch after everyone else had gone to bed. Maxwell found himself noticing little things about her. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the small scar on her wrist from a childhood accident, the way her whole face lit up when she smiled. He was falling in love with her, and the realization terrified him. One evening, about a month after the fire, Rebecca and Maxwell were going over supply lists in the boarding house kitchen when she suddenly set down her pencil and looked at him directly. "Why did you really stay?" she asked. "The truth this time." Maxwell's first instinct was to deflect, to make a joke or change the subject. But Rebecca deserved better than that. She had trusted him with her town, her people, her mission. The least he could do was trust her with the truth. "Because of you," he said simply. "I stayed because of you." Rebecca's breath caught, her eyes searching his face. "Maxwell, I know I should not have," he continued, the words tumbling out now that he had started. "I know I am just a drifter with nothing to offer. I know you deserve better than a man who has spent the last 8 years running from his past. But Rebecca, from the moment I saw you standing in that street, defying Base's gun with nothing but courage and principle, I was lost. You think you have nothing to offer." Rebecca's voice was thick with emotion. "Maxwell, you have given this town more in 4 weeks than Thornton has in 3 years. You have given us hope, organization, protection. You have given me." She paused as if afraid to say the next words. "You have given me something I thought died with my father, the belief that good men still exist in this world." Maxwell stood, closing the distance between them. "Rebecca, I have to tell you something about my past." "You do not have to," she said quickly. "Whatever happened before, I do not care. But I do." Maxwell took her hands, marveling at how small they felt in his. "I want you to know who I am, where I come from. After my parents died, I was angry at the world. I did some things I am not proud of. Rode with a rough crowd for a while, took jobs that were not always on the right side of the law. I never killed anyone who did not deserve it, never robbed honest people, but I was not a good man." "Was," Rebecca repeated, gripping his hands tighter. "Past tense." "I want to be better," Maxwell said. "For you, for this town. But you need to know what you are getting if you give me a chance." Rebecca stood on her toes and kissed him, a soft press of lips that sent electricity through Maxwell's entire body. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining. "I know exactly what I am getting," she said. "A man who helps old ladies carry groceries, who works himself to exhaustion rebuilding his neighbor's store, who risks his life protecting a town full of strangers. That is who you are now, Maxwell Young, and that is the man I am falling in love with." Maxwell kissed her again, deeper this time, pouring 8 years of loneliness and longing into it. Rebecca responded with equal passion, her hands fisting in his shirt as if afraid he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Maxwell said, the words feeling both foreign and absolutely right. "I did not think I was capable of it anymore, but God help me, Rebecca, I love you." "I love you too," Rebecca whispered, and Maxwell felt something shift in his soul, like a lock opening after years of being sealed shut. Their moment was interrupted by frantic knocking at the front door. Maxwell reluctantly released Rebecca and went to answer it, finding Samuel Hart on the porch, his face pale with fear. "They have got Dr. Nash," Samuel said, gasping for breath. "Thornton's men grabbed him off the street about an hour ago. They are saying he treated one of their rivals, someone Thornton had a dispute with. They took him to the mine." Maxwell's blood ran cold. Thornton's main mine was a dangerous place, with deep shafts and unstable tunnels. If they wanted to make someone disappear, it would be the perfect location. "How many men?" Maxwell asked, already strapping on his gun belt. "At least 6, maybe more." Samuel looked at Rebecca. "Miss Norton, this is not your fight. You should stay here where it is safe." "Like hell," Rebecca said, grabbing a rifle from the cabinet. "Doctor Nash has been a boarder here for 2 years. He is family." Maxwell wanted to argue, to insist she stay behind where she would be safe. But he knew Rebecca well enough by now to know she would never agree. And honestly, they needed all the help they could get. They gathered a group of 10 townspeople willing to stand up to Thornton, including Thomas Fletcher, Margaret Chen's son Robert, and a few of the miners who had lost claims to Thornton's schemes. They rode out to the mine as the sun was setting, the sky painted in shades of orange and red that seemed ominous given their mission. The mine entrance was guarded by 2 of Thornton's men, but they were not expecting trouble. Maxwell and Thomas managed to subdue them quietly, tying them up before they could raise an alarm. Inside the mine, lamplight flickered in the depths and voices echoed off the rock walls. Maxwell led the group deeper, following the sounds. They found Dr. Nash in a side chamber, tied to a support beam while Johnny Bass and 3 other men stood over him. The doctor's face was bruised, but he was conscious and defiant. "Where is Thornton?" Maxwell called out, his revolver trained on Bass. Bass turned, surprise flickering across his face before it hardened into anger. "Young, should have known you would stick your nose in this. Thornton warned me you were becoming a problem." "Let Dr. Nash go," Maxwell said calmly. "This is between me and Thornton. No need for anyone else to get hurt." "It is too late for that," Bass said. "Thornton is done playing nice. He is going to crush this whole town, starting with anyone who helped you organize against him." "There are 10 of us and 4 of you," Rebecca pointed out, her rifle steady. "The math does not work in your favor." Bass looked around, seeming to realize for the first time that he was outmatched. But instead of backing down, he pulled his gun and pointed it at Dr. Nash's head. "Maybe not, but I can take the doctor with me. Back off or I shoot him right now." Maxwell's mind raced, calculating angles and timing. He could take the shot, but Bass might get one off first. Dr. Nash would die, and that blood would be on Maxwell's hands. But then Rebecca did something that stopped Maxwell's heart. She lowered her rifle and stepped forward, hands raised. "Take me instead. I am the one Thornton really wants. My property, my resistance. Let Dr. Nash go and you can use me as leverage." "Rebecca, no," Maxwell said, his voice sharp with panic, but Bass was already considering it. "Miss Norton." "Yeah, Thornton has wanted to break you for a long time." "All right, step forward slowly." Maxwell caught Rebecca's eye and saw the trust there, the absolute certainty that he would not let anything happen to her. In that moment, he understood what she was doing. She was creating an opportunity, trusting him to take advantage of it. As Rebecca moved toward Bass, Maxwell counted the steps, waiting for the perfect moment. When Rebecca was 3 feet from Bass, she suddenly dropped to the ground. Maxwell fired instantly, his bullet catching Bass in the shoulder and spinning him around. The other 3 men went for their guns, but Maxwell's group was ready. Thomas tackled one, Robert Chen disarmed another, and Samuel knocked the third unconscious with a well-placed rifle butt. Within seconds, it was over. Maxwell rushed to Rebecca, helping her up and checking her for injuries. "Are you insane?" he demanded, his voice shaking with residual fear. "You could have been killed." "But I was not," Rebecca said, cupping his face with her hands. "Because I knew you would not let that happen. I trust you, Maxwell, completely." Maxwell pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair and trying to calm his racing heart. Behind them, Samuel was untying Dr. Nash while the others secured Thornton's men. "Thank you," Dr. Nash said, rubbing his wrists. "I thought I was done for. Are you hurt badly?" Rebecca asked, immediately shifting into caretaker mode. "Nothing that will not heal," the doctor assured her. "But we have a bigger problem. I heard Bass talking before you arrived. Thornton is planning something big, some kind of final move to take control of the whole town. He is bringing in more men, at least 20 gunfighters, and he is going to force everyone to sell their property or face the consequences." Maxwell exchanged a grim look with Rebecca. This had escalated beyond local intimidation into something much more dangerous. 20 armed men could overwhelm Hawthorne's resistance, especially if Sheriff Morgan threw his support behind Thornton. "When?" Maxwell asked. 3 days, Dr. Nash said. "He is waiting for the men to arrive from California." 3 days to prepare for what might be the battle that decided Hawthorne's future. As they rode back to town with their prisoners, Maxwell's mind was already working on strategies and defenses. But he was acutely aware of Rebecca riding beside him, of the woman he loved being in danger because of a fight that was not originally his. That night, after securing Bass and his men in the town jail over Sheriff Morgan's protests, Maxwell and Rebecca returned to the boarding house. The other boarders had long since gone to bed, leaving them alone in the kitchen. "You should leave," Rebecca said quietly, pouring them both coffee. "Take your horse and ride out tonight. When Thornton arrives with his men, it is going to get bloody. You have done enough, Maxwell." More than anyone could have asked. Maxwell took the coffee cup but did not drink. "You think I would abandon you now, abandon this town? I think I love you too much to watch you die for a place that is not even your home," Rebecca said, her voice breaking. "Please, Maxwell. I am not asking you to run away out of cowardice. I am asking you to live. For me, for us, for whatever future we might have together." Maxwell set down the cup and pulled Rebecca into his arms. "This is my home," he said firmly. "Maybe I did not realize it until now, but Hawthorne is where I belong, because you are here. My wandering days are over, Rebecca. I am staying, and we are going to fight Thornton together." Rebecca buried her face in his chest, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. "I am so scared," she whispered. "I have been pretending to be brave for so long, but the truth is I am terrified. Of losing you, of losing this town, of ending up like my father." "I am scared too," Maxwell admitted, "but we are not alone. We have good people on our side, people willing to fight for what is right, and we have each other." Rebecca pulled back to look at him, her eyes red but determined. "Promise me something. If it goes bad, if we are going to lose, promise me you will get out. Save yourself even if you cannot save me." "I cannot promise that," Maxwell said, "because I am not leaving without you, ever. Where you go, I go. That is my promise." "Maxwell." He silenced her with a kiss, gentle at first but growing more intense as 8 years of loneliness and pain flowed out of him. Rebecca responded with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Maxwell rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know the timing is terrible and I have nothing to offer but a wanderer's savings and a possibly doomed cause, but Rebecca Norton, will you marry me?" Rebecca laughed through her tears. "You are right, the timing is terrible. We might be dead in 3 days. So that is a no." "That is a yes, you foolish man," Rebecca said, kissing him again. "Yes, I will marry you. Today, tomorrow, whenever we can find a minister willing to do it." As it turned out, Dr. Nash was also an ordained minister, having studied theology before turning to medicine. The next morning, he married Maxwell and Rebecca in the boarding house parlor, with all the boarders and half the town as witnesses. Rebecca wore her best dress, a simple cream-colored affair with lace at the collar, and Maxwell cleaned up better than anyone expected in his Sunday clothes. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When Dr. Nash pronounced them husband and wife, Maxwell kissed his bride to cheers and applause. For a few perfect minutes, the threat of Thornton's arrival faded away, and there was only joy and hope and love. But reality returned quickly. They had 2 days left to prepare, and there was much to do. Maxwell organized the town's defenses with military precision. He positioned men at strategic points, set up barriers on the main street, and ensured everyone knew their role when Thornton arrived. He also sent word to neighboring towns, hoping for reinforcements, though he knew help might not arrive in time. Rebecca worked just as tirelessly, organizing the women and children into a support network. She converted the boarding house basement into a shelter and stockpiled supplies. She also reached out to Thornton directly, sending a message that the town wanted to negotiate, hoping to buy more time. On the morning of the 3rd day, Maxwell stood on the boarding house porch, watching the eastern horizon. Rebecca came out to join him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "Any sign of them?" she asked. "Not yet," Maxwell said, "but they will come." "Do you think we have a chance?" Maxwell turned to face her, cupping her cheek with his hand. "I think we have something worth fighting for." "That has to count for something." Rebecca leaned into his touch. "I do not regret anything. Even if this is the end, I do not regret loving you or marrying you or fighting beside you." "It is not the end," Maxwell said with more confidence than he felt. "We are going to win, and then we are going to build a life together. Maybe rebuild my family's ranch in Texas, raise some horses, have a few kids, grow old together arguing about who makes better coffee." Rebecca smiled. "That sounds perfect. Let us make sure it happens." Thornton arrived at noon with 23 armed men, riding into Hawthorne like a conquering general. Benjamin Thornton himself was a portly man in his 50s with cold blue eyes and an expensive suit that looked ridiculous in the dusty mining town. He rode directly to the middle of Main Street and stopped, surveying the barriers and armed townspeople with obvious disdain. "I am giving you one chance," Thornton called out, his voice carrying across the silent town. "Everyone who has refused my generous offers for their property can reconsider now. Sell to me at my price and we can avoid unpleasantness. Refuse, and my men will take what I want by force." Maxwell stepped out from behind a barrier, Rebecca at his side. "The people of Hawthorne are not selling, Thornton. Not now, not ever. You have terrorized this town long enough. It ends today." Thornton's laugh was ugly. "And who is going to stop me? You, a drifter cowboy playing hero. My men will cut through your little militia like butter." "Maybe," Maxwell agreed. "But some of your men will die too. Are you willing to pay that price for a moment?" Uncertainty flickered across Thornton's face. Then he shrugged. "I have money to hire more men. Do you have money to replace your dead neighbors?" He gestured to his gunmen. "Take the town. Kill anyone who resists." What followed was chaos. Thornton's men opened fire, and the townspeople returned volleys from their defensive positions. Maxwell moved through the battle like a man possessed, his revolver spitting lead with deadly accuracy. Rebecca fought beside him, her rifle dropping gunmen with surprising precision. But Thornton's men were professionals, and they began to overwhelm the defenders. Maxwell watched in horror as Thomas Fletcher took a bullet to the leg, as Margaret Chen's son fell with a shoulder wound. They were losing. Then, like a miracle, reinforcements arrived. Riders thundered into town from the west, at least 30 men from the neighboring towns that Maxwell had contacted. They had received his messages and decided that Thornton's tyranny was a threat to all of Nevada. The tide turned immediately. Faced with overwhelming numbers and realizing he had miscalculated badly, Thornton ordered a retreat. His men fled, leaving several dead and wounded behind. Thornton himself tried to escape, but was captured by Samuel Hart and Peter Larson. When the gunfire finally stopped, Maxwell found Rebecca in the street, her dress torn and her face smudged with gunpowder but miraculously unhurt. He pulled her into his arms, relief flooding through him so intensely he could barely stand. "We won," Rebecca said, sounding dazed. "We actually won." "We did," Maxwell confirmed, kissing the top of her head. "It is over." The aftermath took weeks to sort through. Thornton was arrested by a federal marshal and sent to San Francisco to stand trial for murder, arson, and a dozen other crimes. His assets in Hawthorne were seized and distributed back to the people he had stolen from. Sheriff Morgan, facing his own charges for corruption, resigned and left town in disgrace. A new sheriff was elected, a fair man named Robert Davis who had ridden in with the reinforcements. The town began to heal, rebuilding what had been destroyed and forming new partnerships between previously competing interests. Peter Larson reopened his general store with money from his insurance policy and donations from grateful townspeople. Dr. Nash expanded his practice, treating the wounded and even taking on an apprentice. Through it all, Maxwell and Rebecca built their life together. They kept the boarding house running, but also bought a small ranch on the outskirts of town where they planned to raise horses. Maxwell discovered he had a gift for training animals, and soon his horses were in demand throughout Nevada. 6 months after the battle for Hawthorne, Rebecca came to Maxwell in the barn where he was working with a particularly spirited mare. The smile on her face told him something wonderful before she even spoke. "I am pregnant," she said simply. Maxwell dropped the brush he was holding and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "Are you sure?" he asked, setting her down gently. "Dr. Nash confirmed it this morning," Rebecca said, her eyes shining. "We are going to have a baby, Maxwell." Maxwell felt tears prick his eyes, emotions overwhelming him. After so many years of loneliness and pain, he had found not just love but a family, a home, a purpose. "I love you so much," he said, his voice thick. "Both of you." Their son was born on a cold December morning in 1879. They named him Daniel William Young after both of their fathers. He had Rebecca's green eyes and Maxwell's dark hair, and from the moment Maxwell held him, he knew his wandering days were truly over. This tiny human needed him, depended on him, and Maxwell would spend the rest of his life being worthy of that trust. Rebecca proved to be a natural mother, though Maxwell insisted on doing his share of the work. He learned to change diapers, to soothe a crying infant at 3 in the morning, to sing lullabies in his rough cowboy voice. The boarding house thrived under their joint management, and their ranch grew steadily. When Daniel was 2 years old, Rebecca became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin daughters they named Sarah Rebecca and Emma Rose. The girls inherited their mother's determination and their father's stubbornness, a combination that kept their parents constantly on their toes. Over the years, Hawthorne continued to grow and prosper. The silver mines produced steadily, but the town diversified beyond mining, becoming a center for ranching and trade. Maxwell became a respected member of the community, serving on the town council and helping to resolve disputes. Rebecca opened a school, ensuring that all children in Hawthorne, regardless of their family's wealth, received an education. They grew old together, exactly as Maxwell had promised on that dangerous day before the battle. Maxwell's hair turned gray at the temples, and Rebecca's face gained laugh lines from years of smiling. Their children grew up strong and healthy, eventually having children of their own. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Maxwell and Rebecca sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in brilliant colors. Their grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "You ever miss it?" Rebecca asked, taking Maxwell's hand. The wandering, the open road, the freedom of having no ties. Maxwell looked at her, at the woman who had given him everything worth having. "Not for a second," he said truthfully. "My wandering days led me to you, and that was their purpose. Everything I did, everywhere I went, it was all leading me here, to this porch, this moment, this life with you." "I love you," Rebecca said, the words as heartfelt as the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," Maxwell replied. "Forever." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Maxwell thought back to that day in July 1878 when a bullet tore through his hat, and he saw Rebecca's face in the saloon window. He had been running then, convinced that connections meant pain and loss meant too much to risk love again. But Rebecca had changed everything. She had shown him that roots did not trap you, but rather gave you the strength to weather any storm. She had taught him that love was not a weakness, but the greatest source of courage. And she had given him a home, not just a physical place, but a sense of belonging that he had been searching for since the day his parents died. In the years that followed, Maxwell and Rebecca faced many more challenges. There were droughts that threatened their ranch, illnesses that tested their strength, and the normal trials of raising a family. But they faced everything together, their love growing deeper with each passing year. Their children carried on their legacy. Daniel became a lawyer, fighting for justice in the Nevada courts. Sarah married a rancher and raised horses even finer than her father's. Emma became a teacher like her mother, eventually taking over the Hawthorne school. When Maxwell turned 65, the town of Hawthorne threw him and Rebecca a party, celebrating not just their anniversary but their contributions to the community. Standing before the gathered crowd, Maxwell felt a sense of peace and contentment that would have seemed impossible to his younger self. "Rebecca and I came together in troubled times," Maxwell said in his speech. "This town was under threat, and good people were suffering. But we stood together, fought together, and built something lasting. Hawthorne is not just a place on a map. It is a community of people who care for each other, who stand up for what is right, who refuse to let fear dictate their choices. I am proud to call it home." The crowd erupted in applause, and Maxwell saw tears streaming down Rebecca's face. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead as he had done thousands of times before. Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Rebecca rested her head on Maxwell's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Do you remember that night before the battle?" she asked. "When I asked you to promise you would save yourself even if you could not save me." "I remember," Maxwell said, "and I remember refusing to promise." "I am glad you refused," Rebecca said, "because we saved each other, did we not? You saved me from fighting alone, from facing Thornton without hope, and I saved you from a life of wandering, from running from your past forever." Maxwell tightened his arms around her. "We did save each other, and we built this incredible life together." On their 50th wedding anniversary, Maxwell and Rebecca renewed their vows in the same boarding house parlor where they had first married. Dr. Nash had passed away years earlier, but their son Daniel, now a respected judge, officiated the ceremony. Their 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren attended, along with what seemed like half of Nevada. When Daniel pronounced them husband and wife for the second time, Maxwell kissed Rebecca with all the passion and tenderness of their first kiss. The room erupted in cheers and applause, and Maxwell felt a profound sense of gratitude for the life they had built together. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching another Nevada sunset, Rebecca turned to Maxwell with a mischievous smile. "So, husband of 50 years, any regrets?" Maxwell pretended to consider the question seriously. "Well, you do make terrible coffee," Rebecca laughed, swatting his arm. "You said the same thing on our first anniversary." "And it has been true for 50 years, Maxwell said, pulling her close. "But I regret nothing. Every day with you has been a gift, even the difficult ones. Especially the difficult ones because they taught us how strong we are together." "Do you remember what you said to me the night before the battle?" Rebecca asked. "About growing old together, arguing about who makes better coffee." "I do," Maxwell said. "And here we are, old and still arguing." "Not so old that I cannot still beat you in a foot race," Rebecca challenged. "Not so old that I cannot still sweep you off your feet," Maxwell countered, and proved it by standing and pulling her into his arms, spinning her around just as he had when she told him about their first pregnancy. Their children and grandchildren watched from inside the house, smiling at the elderly couple who still acted like newlyweds. It was a legacy of love that would carry on for generations, a reminder that true love does not fade with time, but rather grows richer and deeper. Maxwell Young passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Rebecca holding his hand. His funeral was the largest Hawthorne had ever seen, with people coming from across Nevada to pay their respects to the man who had helped save their town and spent a lifetime making it better. Rebecca followed him 6 months later, unable to bear being apart from her beloved husband. On the night she died, her children and grandchildren surrounded her bed, and her last words were about Maxwell. "Tell him I am coming," she whispered. "Tell him I waited forever." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, with a simple stone that read, "Maxwell and Rebecca Young, wanderer and homemaker." Together they built a legacy of love, but their story did not end with their deaths. Their children carried on their values, their grandchildren told stories of their courage, and their great-grandchildren grew up in a Hawthorne that was prosperous and free because of the stand Maxwell and Rebecca had taken all those years ago. The boarding house still stood, now run by their granddaughter Emily, who maintained it exactly as Rebecca had, with lace curtains and fresh bread and a welcome for travelers. The ranch thrived under the management of their grandson Thomas, who bred horses that were famous throughout the West. And on summer evenings, when the sun set over the Nevada hills in brilliant shades of orange and red, people in Hawthorne would sometimes swear they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old Young ranch, holding hands and watching the sunset together. Whether it was actually the spirits of Maxwell and Rebecca, or just the play of light and shadow, no one could say for certain. But everyone agreed that if anyone deserved an eternal love that transcended death, it was the cowboy and the boarding house keeper who had saved Hawthorne, and found in each other the home they had both been searching for. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived in Hawthorne 100 years later, carrying on the legacy of courage and integrity that Maxwell and Rebecca had established. The story of how they met, fell in love, and fought for their town became legend, told and retold until it was hard to separate fact from embellishment. But the core truth remained constant. In the summer of 1878, a wandering cowboy rode into Hawthorne and found the one thing he had been searching for without knowing it. A woman brave enough to stand against injustice, strong enough to fight for her beliefs, and loving enough to see past his rough exterior to the good man underneath. And when she whispered, "I will wait for you forever," on the eve of battle, the cowboy knew his wandering days were over. Not because he was trapped or tamed, but because he had finally found what he had been wandering toward all along: a place to belong, a cause to fight for, and a love that would last beyond his lifetime. Their story became a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to the strength that comes from standing together, and to the simple truth that home is not a place, but a person who makes you want to stop running and start building. Maxwell and Rebecca Young had built a good life together, raised fine children, served their community with honor, and loved each other with a devotion that inspired everyone who knew them. In the end, that was the greatest legacy they left behind. Not the ranch or the boarding house or even the town they had helped save, but the proof that true love exists, that it is worth fighting for, and that when you find it, you hold on with everything you have and never let go. Maxwell had wandered for 8 years searching for something he could not name. Rebecca had stood her ground in Hawthorne, fighting her lonely battle against corruption and greed. When they found each other, two incomplete souls merged into one complete whole, and the result was a love story that would be told in Nevada for generations to come. The boarding house still welcomed travelers, the ranch still bred fine horses, and Hawthorne still prospered as a community built on the principles of justice and mutual support that Maxwell and Rebecca had fought so hard to preserve. And every young couple who fell in love in Hawthorne hoped that their love would be even half as true and lasting as the legendary romance between the wandering cowboy and the determined boarding house keeper who had changed each other's lives forever.